Hey everyone, I am the TheChosenOneLegend here, as always joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kai, also known as Fascurreyn.
And welcome back to the BunchaJokahs, where we are here once again for our final chapter breakdown of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. We're looking at chapter 7, in the end game here now. And there's going to be a lot to discuss here, despite the fact it's just one chapter. So we better get into things. But as usual, I should say full spoilers. I mean, it's a chapter 7 discussion. What are you doing here if you didn't
Yeah.
expect that? But there will be spoilers for potentially post-game stuff as well. We'll sort of go into that a little bit, I suppose. Um, there will be potentially spoilers for 1 and 2, because we reference
Almost
bits from
certainly will
those.
be today.
Yeah, especially in this one, so keep that in mind. But again, you probably knew that already. And there will be timestamps in the description below if you want to check out any of the different sections as we break down the chapter. But if you're ready, Kai, we'll just get on with it for the last one of these.
Yeah, these have been. I think when we were planning these at first, I severely underestimated how much we'd talk about these chapters and just how much content they packed into each one. So
Yeah,
I'm ready to just talk about one chapter this time, but I don't think it's going to be any shorter, I'll tell you that.
most likely not. And just keep in mind, this won't be the end of Xenoblade discussions. There will be more ones on other parts of the game coming. But final chapter breakdown, and it starts off with a massive lore drop from Nia. So we're this is pretty much when the game answers 90% of the questions that were left lingering.
Mhm.
And to start things off, though, I want to say that we get our first look at Melia, like for real, not robot Melia, real Melia in the world of Xenoblade One,
We
and
do.
it's good to see her. It's good to hear that. Like I think it's an Area C remix that plays. It's
Yes.
it's nice stuff.
Yeah, it's great to see her there. Of course, we had already had Nia's design. I think the first place we actually see Nia's redesign is in like a flashback with Gondor, or no, Mobius M, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it's like
Um,
it's in like foggy, but you can just about see it. Then yeah,
yeah, but of course, yeah, Melia you get to see just properly now. And honestly, I really like her redesign. I think it's shown that she's a bit older, as it
Hmm.
should be. Doesn't look too vastly different. Seems about right. Jenna Coleman did a good job again. It is kind of weird, like I think because it has been so long for the voice and she's kind of getting used to it. It's very clear that Melia sounds older here, which is another thing to appreciate. So
Yeah, it definitely fits. And now, whilst we have already seen Nia, I do want to mention that we see little bits of a tease of the world of Xenoblade 2, but they don't show
hmm
much. They still like avoiding answering what it's like after 2. We get like a little bit of the Gorma Arch, I think it is, or like
yeah,
Torgoth, it looks a bit like. But they're playing their cards close to their chest there still, for now.
for now, yeah, they sort of talk a lot about the lore. They really go into it. And
Hmm.
specifically, it's like, oh, the two worlds are colliding, what they call the intersection, and oh my god,
Yes.
it's literally like a catastrophe on an astronomical level because both
Yeah.
universes are going to collide and get destroyed, and they're like fully ready for that. That's
Yes.
such like a crazy sort of thing to see coming.
It kind of makes sense when you think about it. We knew the two worlds were fusing together somehow, but I never really thought about it in the context of, yes, them two coming back together might just not be smooth sailing. It could be some massive disaster. And we see
Hmm.
that in response to this, they create Origin, which is, we're going to see more of a lot of this chapter, but this giant device where they create half in Xenoblade One's world and half of Xenoblade Two's world with the help of Tora. It is alluded to. We even see a little
Yes.
bit of him in the screenshot. Uh, he's moved up on the world from making waifu robots, but but it's cool to see that. And yeah, and Origin was meant to be the thing that safely separates the worlds. And I gotta admit though, when I first played this, I thought that the point of Origin was that the worlds would transition together smoothly. I
Yeah,
didn't
that's what
realise
I
till the
thought.
end game that it was actually the point of Origin is to separate them. And to be fair, the evidence is there. They do mention it, but I had the wrong idea of that at the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they're. For one, I always find it odd, like, how did they even make Origin with. How did they both make it with the same material? Like, how did that all make sense? But I think I'm getting into semantics there. But yeah, it's really cool to have the Torah mention, and yeah, it's just like a very crazy thing to see that they both just built this massive sphere. And they're both like,
Yeah.
we are going to put everyone's consciousness in here because no one is surviving this. They said, like, when these two worlds, do end up coming into contact, everyone dies. And, like, we just need to, like, move on after that if that happens. Like, they really sort of talk about it, and Melia's, like, very accepting that is what's going to happen, and it could very well just cause, like, everyone to die. And, like, that's a level that, like, we've kind of seen before, but not in this way,
Yes. And we also learn a bit more about the antagonists. We learn how it goes wrong when Z, X and Y, the lead Mobius, the original Mobius, show up and essentially stop it midway in the process, I suppose. Which is why it explains why we've got this sort of fusion of the two worlds where everything's not quite right. I guess it explains the annihilation events, which is part of Origin not working, but the world disappearing at certain points. And even Noah, it's not really mentioned too much, really, but Noah does say right at the start of the game, slowly our world is dying. So clearly the Mobius isn't fully working. But yeah, that sort of explains them, and technically we don't get this told until a little bit later on, but I think we might as well lump it in now. We sort of get a bit the whole idea that the Mobius are more of a concept, that they are consciousness from people's fears in Origin.
I do think
not
they
wanting
mention
to move
that
on.
in this part, like Nia's law. She mentions
They do
that
a
they're
bit,
all like,
yeah.
yeah, they're like, oh, we're trapping their consciousness in here, and that distorted and became worries and anxiousness, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Though, yeah, right. There's so much lore at that point that small things like that can completely go over your head, like it did for me.
Oh yeah, it's interesting, and I know this is the villains of this are a common complaint, and we'll get to Zed later when we get more into him. But I don't hate this idea of villains as a concept. It's just they're not as much the focus in the world of 3 as they were in 2. It's sort of, I guess, 1's a bit more of a middle ground. 2's all in the villains. 1 is less so. 3 is less so. But I think it's an interesting, different approach for a third game in the series.
Yeah, I think it makes for an interesting villain. Doesn't make for an interesting character. Like there
Yes.
is no real character to explore there, but the villain is more of a concept, and it's like, well, okay, if you think about it, then it's pretty interesting. Just not having a good character tied to that concept is a bit difficult. But then again, I don't know really how you would make a character tied to it.
Yeah, and we'll get to Zed a little bit later. But we also learn here that Melia is being captured in Origin, that she is there, and I should mention we know that Origin is at the centre of Ionios in the Void, which, I mean, I think we all saw that coming.
Yeah, when did you realise that? I've got to know.
To be honest, I think I noticed it when you said it on stream. I think I hadn't paid attention to it beforehand, so I can't really claim ownership over that idea.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if you were still there when I did that, but yeah, it was when I was in Dinar Desert, and you just look out at the clouds, and I was like, that's a lot of really, like, very sort of concealing clouds in the middle of the region. Like, I was like, that's gotta be the secret base, like, surely. And then just every time I saw it for the rest of the game, I was like, that's definitely it. And then Nia goes, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, I know it. I'm sure everyone would have picked up on that at some point or another. I'm sure of it, right? Unless you just bulleted through the story and never went to Dinar Desert.
Yeah, I think anyone who decided to start thinking about it would realise it's not.
Yeah, if you really explored and stuff.
Yeah, there's nowhere else in the world that the final area could be, I suppose. So it makes sense. But we sort of get a bit more lore on Nia. We know that she created the Ouroboros, the gear she's using for the Ouroboros stones from a Shard of Origin, as well as her like catalysis abilities. It's all sort of connected there. And yeah, that's sort of a bit more lore on the Ouroboros here. But now it's our task to go to Origin, except she doesn't know how to get there, and the cast are just like, oh, damn it, Nia. I should mention, I love Nia's personality here, the duality between Royal Queen Nia and the full-on Welshness that seeps through. It's great.
It's just so good because she's very clearly trying to stay like regal, and then every once in a while, just bloody hell. It's like,
Yeah.
that's her.
Yeah, it's great. I like getting a bit ahead, but the second time you visit her, at the end when you leave and you have a bit of progress, she just like does like a little fist clench to herself, and that it's really great that these moments of her personality are still there, and I think it's a great approach for her.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool way of bringing her back, and I mean it's a bigger thing that could be talked about for a while, but it's interesting that they chose Melia and Nia to be the ones to do this, because it's kind of fitting that they were chosen for the roles, being part of the main crew, one of the most key characters, but kind of, I don't know, it's interesting. They're both very obviously similar, because everyone was like, oh, the characters that have Ia at the end of their name and grey hair and get rejected and etc etc. It's like, yeah, it kind of fits. Well, Nia wasn't now, as we know, but anyway.
Well, we'll get there. But yeah, it is interesting. I guess those two both sort of course there's the whole thing about their age, which makes them the perfect choices. But also I feel like both of them have like their story a little bit open at the end of the games.
Yeah.
As to what they'll do next. So it's nice that they decided to use them in here. And we get our goal now. We realise that the only way to break through to Origin is to go to the real MVP again, Samm, and get a new boat number 2, to break through the vortex. And thus begins side quest section.
Yeah, it's just like, we needed something to pad up the chapter, and we haven't really got any more areas left for you to explore, so yeah.
I do think it's kind of nice that, in this final section you get to do like a final lap around the world just to find the Origin Shards. You get to revisit these areas again, like Elais Highway and whatnot, which you might not have been to actually. That's technically optional.
That's something I was going to say, is like all of the areas, well, not all of them, but like a lot of the areas you go to for this section are ones that if you were only doing the main story would be new to you. Elais Highway would be new. The part that you go to in Cadentia is like one of the islands that you wouldn't ever normally visit unless you were doing like Triton's Quest or whatever.
You go to Lower Macfa, don't you, as well?
Yeah, exactly, and you would never normally go there. So it's all these areas, and then I think one of them is on Everblight Plains, which is like, it's a cool revisit to there. So those 4 are all like sort of newish areas for people. So I think that was a good idea of like a way to not have to make a whole new area for it, but sort of give you that world tour, like you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does have some big importance because our final piece is going to be in Keves Castle, which leads us to Noah's side story, which, much like Neo's, is a mandatory one.
Mm-hmm.
And to start things off, we get a little bit of a flashback to Chris. We're going to have some Chris focus here. And we see like homecoming ceremony. The guy's just going to kill him instead.
It's really interesting here that the Mobius they use for not only this, but I believe also like Ashura's Ascension Quest and maybe a couple other places, is all, I think it's like V, I don't remember off the top of my head, I think it's V. But like, he's like the dumbest one in the actual game. He's the one that's in Tyon's side story, who's like very clearly the least intimidating one out of all 25 Mobius. And it's like, why is he used here? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. It's got to get him in there somewhere. I do like that they cross over. That even the optional side quest ones have some appearances in the main story, even in small details. It is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely shows us a lot more of Chris's sort of side of the story, a bit more sort of his personality, the importance of homecoming or playing the flute to him and what it means, and particularly this crosses over because we then get flashbacks to him and Noah, and we get to see him training Noah, and it definitely, I feel like Noah, we're really getting into sort of what makes him him now, how he ended up this way and his viewpoints, and it's a really good tying together. Like, yes, you can see how Chris impacted him and gave him this sort of thoughtfulness about the world, which at the start of the game he was kind of the only one who had. Uni and Lands were just happy in the system, but Noah was the one off-seeing for both sides, wondering why the world is the way it is, and this is like, this is why.
It does make you wonder, kind of how long Chris was a Mobius for, because I can only assume that he may only have become a Mobius after that one scene where, like, he's talking to Noah and then just, like, jumps off of somewhere in Everblight Plains.
Yes, yeah.
Like, it could have just been that. But yeah, Chris is a cool character. How through the entire game you see him in these snippets over and over again in various places. And one of the most important places he shows up is at the beginning of Chapter 6 when, you know, you've got all the fog and the Mobius N backstory and stuff like that. So it's really interesting because I believe that's where his name is first mentioned, and it's like, well, okay, it's pretty cool that we've seen him in snippets and now he's actually, you know, we're really getting to know about him. I do like when the game does that, because it kind of did a similar thing with Miyabi to that effect.
Yes. And it's interesting because, you know, he turns out, like you said, he is a Mobius. And he confronts Noah in Kevis Castle. He just, like, gets rid of the Queen robot. He's like, nah, you're done with her. You know, we don't need her anymore. But you have this confrontation with Chris. But it's kind of interesting because he's really testing Noah and sort of seeing what Noah's learned from what he's taught him. And it's a very different approach compared to a lot of the, you know, all of the other Mobius you fight, really. And it's a lot more, I guess, solemn. And whilst I do wish that we had a bit more time with Chris and Noah's dynamic to flesh out a bit, I feel like it's a sign of a good character that I wanted to see more of him and find out a bit more. But
yeah,
I do like this final moment between them when Noah sort of shows him that he's taken on Chris's lessons and that he's going to use them to, you know, change the future and save this world.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool interaction between the two of them where they do, like, clash ideals, and Noah is talking about the importance of free will and stuff, which I guess in a Xenoblade game you've always got to have it in there somewhere. So, you know, that's fair enough. I feel like one of the weirdest things about the fight is, I mean, there's the two phases. Chris never transforms into a Mobius, despite being one.
No.
The first half of the fight is weird because he... What kind of a weapon would you expect Chris to use if he was a hero? Like his flute or something?
Yeah, you think like Miyabi, sort of, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I just checked it just before we started recording. He uses a claymore like Lanz's made of origin metal. And it's like, what? Chris uses a claymore? Like, you wouldn't see it coming. And then the second half, he uses the Queen's like big flying machine thing. That I suppose the Melia robot never used, but the Nia robot did. It's like, yeah, I guess we needed a use for that. That makes sense. So the fight itself is quite curious to me, but yeah, it's great when, you know, you defeat him and Noah sees him off sobbing, and it's like, yeah, I feel like Noah did, you know, it helps his character to have this moment.
Yeah, I kind of like that. It's interesting that we get, of course, Noah's the protagonist, and we get his sort of story moment last, but like right at the end here, we're getting this sort of moment between him and Chris. But it's a nice way to sort of have your final bit before we get into the crazy stuff that's about to happen.
Yeah.
But I should mention here as well that once we've defeated Chris, we open up our final main area of Ionios itself, which is Forto Vibrus, the sort of Kevis Castle area. Basically the closest we have to a city outside of the city. And there's not too much to it, but it's nice.
I feel like this place has a lot of wasted potential, because when you actually go there, it's probably like the biggest colony, quote unquote, outside of the city. You know, it's very big and it's very interesting. You got a couple like things there, and of course you got the side quests. But like, it's such a interesting big area to me, and it's just a shame that they introduce it right at the very end, so you don't really do much there.
No.
I guess it's just there though, and the cool thing is that you can now explore Kevis Castle, and specifically you can go to the part where there's the Bionis and Mechonis mural, and that sort of that part of Alchemoth, that opening.
We get a nice close-up on that in the flashback as well, with young Noah, which is really cool.
Yeah, I was very excited when I saw that, because I was like, you know, I love me the Xenoblade 1, more specific references at that point. So, you know, it was interesting. I really liked the area, the music's great, but I do wish that they did it earlier in the game or something.
Yeah, it is like they could have had Forto Vibris open and not Kevis Castle. You know, they are separate, so we could have had it earlier. It would have been nice, but it's a neat looking area. The music's pretty chill, not quite Agnes Castle levels, but it's good.
Hmm.
And that does bring us to the end of the collection quest, which means it's time to get our new ship and go on to Breach Origin, which does introduce a banger of a song.
Yes. Oh, this is why I included it in my notes. Is
Yeah.
the Great Sea Stirs, the new ship theme. In the trailer, in like one of the opening trailers or whatever, the big ones, and Mio says like in 3 months I'll be gone, and then the big like orchestra hits in the trailer, and it's like, whoa, this is such like a climactic thing and a cool scene. Where does this song play? I bet it's in like a really hype moment. It's the ship theme. It's the equivalent.
It's the ship theme too.
Oh, okay, yeah, there we go.
Come on.
It's like the equivalent. Imagine I want to recreate that trailer now and just have Mio say like, in 3 months I'll be gone, and then it's it's just Sea Shanty 2 from RuneScape kicks in instead, because that is. I don't know why they made the boat theme so good, but they did.
No,
so
I'm not complaining, to be fair, because
Yeah.
I had a lot of I know I saved a lot of my side quest stuff till the later side quest stuff till afterwards. So that means when in the post game I was going back and exploring Erithia Sea, I got to have that banger playing most of the time. So you know it worked out.
I've just been listening to it on YouTube on repeat. I think it's my most played song from the game now.
It's up there. I've had recently. I'm not getting a bit off topic here, but Capticorn Peak has really gone up for me in the last few days. I forgot quite how good that song is.
One of the best area themes, hands down.
Yeah, this game soundtrack is no slouch. And we are on to the final section now. You know, we embark along with several lost numbers to go breach Origin. Origin does sort of start to fight back. It like rises from the sea, which is a cool visual. And there's this whole bit where you like launch up and like curve back round into it. It reminds me of breaking into the Mechonis core in Xenoblade 1 a little bit, if you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a cool section.
And stuff. Yeah, it's a very cool action shot where it's just like, I mean, it's very similar to that scene, but like there's just so much more happening this time round, and it's like they do make it really intense, and it's they very easily could have just made that scene like maybe 15 seconds long with a lot less going on, but they decided to go all out with it, and it's like, yeah, it's a really good scene.
Yeah, Origin is shooting lasers at everyone. It's it's very cinematic, but you know it's endgame Xenoblade, so I'm glad that they're sticking with that. And that brings us into, you know, there's some of this stuff happens like in different segments. We'll sort of compile bits together here because it sort of goes back and forth. But this brings us into our final area, Origin. We get to explore Origin interior, and it's just a good final end blade, I suppose that works. End game Xenoblade section. It's sort of, again, it's a bit like Mechonis in the sense, that sort of elements of it. This whole like foreign terrain where everything is kind of off, a bit like the World Tree in Xenoblade 2 as well. But it's a really nice atmosphere, in like a creepy way.
Yeah, it's a very interesting final area because it's just full of the Origin metal. It's you know, the theme is really good. It's all just like purple and blacks. Sort of those are the main colours they use for it. It's a very interesting feel, and I remember when I first went through it, I wasn't really able to like exactly place my thoughts on it. I wasn't able to place the vibe as a whole, and I still really can't, because it's just like it's such an interesting final area, you know.
I love the parts of it where you can like see the outside of the world. There's a few moments where you can see the exterior of Origin spinning around you, and it's like the furnaces being built. You get to see that as well. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that the way that they sort of do that, and you can see outside and everything, it's pretty cool. Of course, when you're in there, you have all the Origin enemies you fight that are like just purple reskins, I guess.
It's like Fog Beast.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a very odd one, but it's fine. You know, they are just there. I guess one thing to note is if I'm remembering right, I don't think the enemies count as Mobius, when I thought they might have.
Right.
So there's that. I could be remembering wrong on that though.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like there's just a ton of them in the area. Like, you got just evil spiders, evil human type things. You just got a bit of everything, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot here, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here. But I do find it funny that in Origin, X and Y, or particularly Y, is like an optional boss. They're so weirdly strewn at the end, aren't they?
Yeah, X is
like,
the optional one where you only do it if
yeah,
it's
X is even,
Uni's
yes.
side story.
Yeah, which makes sense, but it's kind of funny how they just die and there's no cutscene. It's
yeah, like I thought my game was glitched for a second when it happened. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just done.
Well,
right.
Mine actually did glitch. I know a few people have had this, where when it's either X or Y dies, they just stay there in the dying animation, frozen. And I'm like, are you going anywhere? You just chilling there?
It's so weird.
It's like guy too angry to die or something. It's
yeah. Oh, they are a weird pair, aren't they?
They are. But speaking of too angry to die, let's go on to our real antagonist that we face here. We get our final confrontation with N, Consul N, and he's pissed. You know, he's lost everything at this point. Nothing left to give. He's lying where he's like, "Look how snug you are with your woman on my arm." It's damn N. He's mad.
The amount of jokes you could make about that is like...
Yes, the meme potential.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting confrontation here. You know, it's where it is comparable, of course, to like Jin, where Noah's trying to get through to him, but at this point he's empty at this point, and he's just ready to fight you. He just hates you now. And I really enjoy this fight. The music is so good. It took me it's one of those ones where I had to listen back to it and realise quite how good it is. But the confrontation with N has like themes of like the city in there. It has like the off-scene melody sort of motif in there. It's a really great track and a really nice sort of... If Zed is, you know, not quite your character boss, I really like having N here as your final character climax in that sense.
Yeah, I think that I'll need to re-listen to the theme, but it makes sense that right in the heart of Origin, you know, you'd find N there, and he's absolutely livid. And then, you know, to double the stakes, it's like, well, you've got to do this to save Melia. You know, we've got to do this. It's a super interesting point. You know, he's very clearly broken at this point. In some of the earlier scenes where like there's one where you find out Chris is a Mobius and N is just sitting there absolutely broken. So that's the thing. But the fight was annoying for me, but I think that was like reasons other than N himself. So
yeah, save it for the gameplay discussion, Kai.
Oh lord. Okay.
But yeah, it's an interesting fight, and you know, we beat him, and Mio is actually able, and Noah together, are able to sort of convince him to like stop being sad. You know, that's a dumb way of putting it, but you know, they get him to come around and realise that you know, this isn't what M, the other Mio, would have wanted. She even like tells him that, you know, she just wanted to go back to being called Noah and Mio, not Consuls N and M. I've seen a comment before pointing out that in the final phase with him, he's not even called Consul N anymore. It just refers to him as N. That he's not even fighting you as a consul anymore. He just hates you. But
yeah, that's literally it. He just really like wants to go for you. He doesn't care what the reason is anymore.
But it's nice that, you know, much like, again, the Jin is the easy comparison here, but he has that turnaround, and he's able to sort of see that Noah and Mio, although like the whole theme of this game is that although you don't no clue what's going to happen in the future, they could activate Origin and it all goes to shit, but it's worth the chance to not be this crazy messed up the way the world is now. And we see him fuse back with Noah, and it's nice to see that resolution to his character.
Yeah, N's a very complex character.
He is.
And one that, you know, there's a lot of like different narratives and story things. You know, we could spend an hour just talking about him. But yeah, it's interesting how, you know, what his motive is. We kind of talked a bit in the last one about the idea of the Mobius regaining all their memories and seeing this happen over and over again, and you kind of understand their motives that way. But yeah, Noah in particular, I saw a thing a while back about how apparently it relates somewhat to the other Xeno, like the old Xeno games,
Mm.
where it is the idea of like, he's just been doing it over and over again. He's clearly just sort of looking out for himself at this point, whereas the modern day Noah is understanding what's best for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think it's
this
also
whole thing's cool.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with like regret as well. The fact that he doesn't want to believe that he made the wrong choices because it's too hard to admit to himself that he messed up all those years ago. All we can do is keep moving forward. But Noah's able to convince him, yes, you regret what you did, but all you can do now is move on. And he does. He fuses with Noah. We get the cool thing, which we didn't mention before, but Neo has it, where like their iris has the Mobius and the Ouroboros together, which is really neat. It's a cool visual.
Yeah, it is a cool one that happens, and I was always very confused when that happened because I was like, oh, okay, so he's just done now, I guess. Let's carry on. Because I did not like his character end because of Chapter 5. I was like, oh, Melia's here, let's look at Melia.
This is true, we do get Melie. Melie is back here.
Yeah.
Queen Melia, released from the shackles. RFC theme kicks in again, and yeah, it's just great to see her, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just great to see her. Of course we've seen bits of her in other cutscenes, but this is the first time you actually meet her. The cast is like, oh, it's her, it's Melia, and she's like, I've been watching you this whole time. Like, I know what you've been up to, you can do it. It's like, yeah.
It's that whole bit when they're like, do you want an escort? And she's like, I think not.
Yeah,
you know who I am.
Yeah.
I think we should also mention here, though, a particular moment where she gives Riku a look. Like, what is this? What is that about? Who is Riku?
We have all this speculation about Riku. There's a very good chance that he, those are the two that made Lucky 7 in the first place. It wasn't one of Riku's heirs, it was just of Riku.
Yes.
But either way, I mean, that sort of brings on the idea of what's the deal with Lucky 7. Because we do start getting a little bit more info scattered across this chapter. We kind of learn... I think that Nia actually says early on, she says like, oh, Lucky 7 was made by Melia and a Nopon craftsman. I believe she says something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
It might be, or at least alluded to.
She says
does
something
refer to it
about
as
early on.
She refers to it as the Sword of the End. We hear that name, I think, for maybe the first time. But even it's funny because even Melia, even Nia herself says in that moment, like, yeah, you've got all these special things. None of it really matters, though. Like, they're not they're not the focus. It's not like the Monado or the Aegis sword. It's sort of like, this is powerful because it comes from Origin, and there might be more to it, and maybe we'll learn about it someday. But it's never really made to be the key focus. It's more about the characters themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Like the what I call the Monado of the game, which is just the Monado, Aegis, and Lucky 7. Lucky 7 is definitely like the least relevant out of the three in terms of the overarching story, and that's completely okay because it just shows that it's not what they need to win or whatever. It's not the key to victory. It's just like it's just pretty helpful. It's like hell. It's like Melia just made it. It's fine. But yeah, it's interesting how we do sort of learn bits as time goes on, and one of the weirdest things is all the arbitrary powers that the sword just randomly gains through a lot of the end of the story. Like it somehow is able to, it's able to like just randomly douse locations. You can put it in the floor as like a resonator or whatever you want to call it for that for Mio's side story. In both Senna's and Noah's, it's like, oh, we can just use it to find people. It points to the truth. And it's like, we didn't know that before now. How is it only just showed up? It was like,
it's
really
like one of those,
weird.
it's like an OP like pocket knife multi-tool, basically. It's
yeah, except
can
like,
do everything.
It only remembers that it can do that, like in the last chapter.
Yeah.
Sure, that's fine. Lucky 7's a very interesting one. I hope that maybe I don't know, DLC or who knows what else, we learn a bit more about it, because I feel like it's still got something else to it, like you say, with Melia and stuff.
Yes, there's definitely more to Riku and that, which maybe we'll get. Of course, we'll we'll discuss that in our Future of the Series video, perhaps, when that comes
Mhm.
around. But yeah, it's interesting that they leave that sort of thread open. But we continue through Origin. We join up with Monica and Ghondor, which is nice to see them back. They sort of just completely crashed the mobile artillery into Origin and
Crashing.
join us. Good old
Yeah,
Square Dash.
because there's like a cutscene where they deploy a ship from the city. You do a fight, and then at the end of the fight, they're already there. They just crash into Origin right where you are.
Yeah.
It's like we could have done that and skipped the end fight. To be honest, I mean, of course, Melia
Well,
wouldn't have been saved, but
I think the idea is that maybe, I don't know if they mention this or if it's just my headcanon, but freeing Melia, she's like a power source for Origin. So I was sort of thinking that sort of weakens it.
yeah,
And
something
allows
like
them to
that.
get through or something. But it's interesting that they have Monica and Ghondor with you for the final area as like canon party members, I suppose, as well as Riku and Nana.
It's
I'm
kind
not
of
against
what
it.
I've said,
It
isn't
works.
it? Up to this point, where like there are no recurring supporting characters across the game. You know, Ethel was going to be one; she died early, and apart from that, the only two recurring characters are Monica and Ghondor, which I guess count. But even then, Ghondor was only there from like the end of chapter 5 onwards, and Monica was only there from the start of chapter 5 onwards. These are like the two most recurring characters that are around in the game, and they only appear in the last half of it.
It's true, yeah. I
But
think
yeah,
it's
it makes sense for them to be there, though. I think.
yeah. We sort of have they're sort of there as just city representation, and that's going to
Yeah.
come in right in the end of the game, as I'll get to a little bit when we get there.
Mhm.
But really, the next major thing is we get to the theatre. The theatre we've been seeing throughout this entire game. We finally get there, and confrontation with Zed, the final battle. We'll start with like the first phase as its own thing, but yes, it's Zed. What are your thoughts on Zed then, Kai? I'll hold this over to you first.
Well, when I was playing it, my thoughts on Zed were like completely halted at first because I was so confused and like just shocked by the PNG Mobiuses in the audience.
I have got that saved.
He just
I've got a
clicks and
screenshot of
they
that
all
ready.
appears, and like I spent the first like 15 seconds of that fight just like looking at the audience, being like, "What are these things? What's going on here?" It's so weird to see. It's just funny. So
Boys fan club.
yeah, and then after that, the fight is interesting. Of course, we've already kind of said things about Zed, where like interesting villain, not a great character. Or just not much to him, I suppose.
Yeah.
The fight is a little interesting where, like, he does hinder your abilities, and, you have an ice ground that appears, then a fire ground, and I was like, okay, well, he's got different terrains and locks your abilities. That's pretty cool. It doesn't stick around for too long, to be fair, and it's a fairly scripted fight with, you unlocking your abilities and doing brief chain attacks and interlinking. It's a cool idea that sort of brings those concepts back, to be fair.
It is. I like that we get a bit cinematic with this final fight, and I always love when it manages to link gameplay and story in such a way that you actually see the flashbacks on the screen behind you before they break free. It's sort of a nice reminder of each character's development and the things they've overcome to that point. And yeah, I think even Zed, I will say, like, although I wouldn't even say he's a bad character, he's just not much of a character. I still think his performance, the voice actor does a good job of it. He's suitably menacing, and the fact he's just like, yeah, it's just for the lols. I'm just doing this for the lols. It's
yeah, because he's like, I know I'm
that.
going to win. I've done it every
Yeah.
time. And I guess it brings up the point of, like, in every single time that they've fought before, because, Noah has made it this far, Zed just, like, sort of looks at him a bit funny, and Noah and Mio from the past have just died on the spot. I don't know why he didn't do that this time. Maybe there was some plot armor that I can't remember.
Well, I guess you could do with stuff like Noah activating the true Sword of Origin and that sort of stuff.
Just being built different, I suppose.
Nia does allude to the fact that they've gotten stronger than any of the previous versions in the opening bit when we chat with her. So I guess and largely part to the friends they've sort of found with Noah and Lance, Uni, Tyon, Xena as well.
Yeah.
It's nice seeing the payoff of that, and that this Noah is able to progress through that, and it's just a cool fight with him.
Yeah.
and it ends with Noah sort of straight up just shattering the theater. The arena like collapses, which is really cool looking. And we get in onto our next phase now as sort of the true origin opens up. It's really cool looking the way that origin opens up, and it's like this. It's basically a massive Ferronis, as we sort of learn, and it has like this whole sort of like eagle thing as its like top stand or whatever. It looks really neat. I've got a really cool screenshot of it I'm putting in here. It's
cool.
Some really nice visuals.
Yeah, they do like their cinematography in this game, of course, and they like to show it because it just looks amazing how they do that, and it opens up. And then you kind of have, at this point, it's like, oh no, Zed's not over. We need to like destroy, the evil.
But before we get to that, I do want to quickly mention some stuff that's been happening outside that we haven't mentioned yet. First of all, we get the queens joining the fight in giant mechs of their parts of the castles, which is
the castles were Ferronises all along.
Yes,
that's so cool.
It is. It's the way that Nia uses, of course, her blade from Xenoblade 2, and Melia uses her staff from Future Connected to activate them. The way that it's just it's end game Xenoblade. You've got to have your big crazy mechs in there, and it looks badass.
Yeah, it's very cool to see. I really like it.
Yeah,
it just looks good. Like that's really all it is. It just looks really cool, and then both of them using their tech to order the troops from both sides forward. It's very cool to see.
Speaking of that, I also want to mention that we see Agnes and Keves both starting to fight back against Origin, sort of working together, which is nice to see the world coming together, with particular focus on my man BOLEARIS. Yes,
we love BOLEARIS. Oh, I think I peaked my mic. Sorry for people. But yes, BOLEARIS is here because he's like the one alive character that they know can be mentioned and stuff. With no worry about canon lore.
Doesn't he just kick the Ferronis into working or something like that when Colony 4's not working? It just starts working. It's just the old BOLEARIS is great.
Yeah, I think he's pretty cool. I like how he's very clearly come into his own here. I mean, whether you do his quest or not to make him more confident doesn't actually matter, but yeah, it's cool that they choose him here. I think they also mention Colony 30, but of course they don't do anything to do with Valdi, just in case you've chosen him to be your hero.
Right, yeah.
I would have personally liked maybe a little scene with all the different colonies contributing in their own way with each of the heroes, maybe, but maybe I'm asking a bit much there, considering what happens later on in the fight.
That's true, and maybe we'll get to that then. We have our final main fight with Zed now. Big, giant Andros head Zed.
Yeah.
And
Zed Infinity.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting that we have this sort of giant, the true form of Mobius, as it said. He's just, at this point, he's just lost it, and I know, the whole bit where he's just I hate it. He's freaking out here. Yeah, it's me when I'm playing Mario Party and I lose all my stars. It's,
I feel
we've
that.
all been there.
Yeah,
But,
he's now not even a character at all. Now he is fully a concept, and it's this is how the character is. This is their real form.
Especially when we see him, it's quite cool. He takes the form of Noah and the rest of the cast. That there's a bit of Mobius in everyone, which makes sense. We see that throughout the story. That not even all the characters are sure if moving on the world is the right thing to do, and you can understand why. People in the city are happy to just keep living comfortably as things are. But so it makes sense that yes, Mobius as this concept isn't just certain evil people; it's part of everyone. Yeah.
Especially the part where they have the main characters' faces, it morphs into them.
Yes.
At the beginning of that fight and stuff, it's whoa, that's us. It sort of shows that it's not just a character. It really is a concept that they're fighting against here, which I like it. It's cool. And
in general, I just really love this fight. The way that, again, the cinematic stuff, how it splits you apart, and for a moment you're crap, I've lost half of my party, what am I going to do? But then all of the heroes you found start joining you one by one, and getting to fight alongside all the heroes at once. It's just so cool. Honestly, like it's got to be one of my favourite final fights in Xenoblade. Maybe not due to like the gameplay itself so much, but just the way it melds it with the story is just, it's hype. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the best way
really,
to put
really
it.
good. You know, it's like, oh no, there's only three of us. But wait, every hero you've unlocked at that point joins you. The only gripe is that they don't. To memory, I don't think they put Agnes and Kevis respectively into the right places for like the hero
I don't
affiliations.
think
But
so.
that's fine.
No.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's still really cool.
Yeah.
It's definitely, and I should mention, of course, that not only that, but the queens themselves join the fight,
Yes,
and we
they
get
find
to
the
see.
Z part.
Yes, we get to see Nia and Melia join you, and of course it's a tease for the fact that they're going to be playable in the post game.
Mhm.
But just getting to see them fighting alongside you again, Melia using Starlight Kick, Nia with
Yeah.
like the Aegis blades around her as well in like mirages. It's just
Feels good.
the fight just kept on going, building hype. And that's the best way I can put it. It's a bit fan servicey, but it's not in a bad way. It's done so well for just a pure hype final boss that makes you feel ready to take him down.
Yeah, some would argue it takes a bit of a what one might call a Marvel approach, where they have everyone come in and do
Yeah,
it all at once. But um, I always here's one thing when in the end of Xenoblade 1 and 2, my main wish was that for the final boss, you got to use all of your characters. You got to use all of your party members in both games to
yeah,
fight the final bosses. And the amazing thing is you can do that across this entire game. That's the whole concept. But then to take it a step further by having all the heroes you've recruited take part for a bit of the fight, it's like, okay,
yeah,
that's really, really cool. I love that concept.
yeah. It really pays off for like the whole world fighting together to defeat the villain of the world. You know, it's not just a few guys; it's the whole world coming together, and it really pays off in that way. It's
Yeah.
yeah, really fun fight and good music too. I need to listen to it more.
Mm.
Actually, I haven't done it too much, but it's a nice track.
It's like so much of the soundtrack. It's so long.
Yeah, there's the fact it didn't win Game of the Year soundtrack. You know, I'll never forgive Jeff.
Yeah, it's
Got
Game
my eyes on
Awards
you,
for
Jeff. But you know, we beat them. I do want to mention one funny thing here, which is when I got the final hit on Zed's true form, it must have turned from day to night because Mio said something like, "Oh, it's morning time." The moment I got the final hit, I've got a screen clip of it. It was just really funny.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I need to see that. That's so good.
I'll send that to you actually. Yeah, I didn't know that
Okay.
could happen, but it was great. Maybe I'll slot that in here.
It's already getting dark.
But
Also, we should mention, I mean, we've already talked about it, but for the final boss,
Yeah.
I used Riku Manana as my hero. You used Miyabi, right?
yes, I did.
Yeah.
I think Riku and Nana are the perfect pick, but I
Yeah.
don't like them in combat, so Miyabi was for me.
They're like one of the worst heroes in combat, but I was like,
Yeah.
I have to do it for the story, you know?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
But you know, we beat them, and things are not looking great because it's sort of this whole idea that you can't truly destroy a concept, I guess, because they're not Mobius themselves. They can't erase the Mobius, which is when N and M come out. We find out that they are part of Mio and Noah still. They sort of separate themselves in like these little ghostly forms and essentially sacrifice themselves to get rid of Zed. And yeah, it's a nice moment getting to see them together again, getting to see N with M, actually them both being happy again like they once were and realising their mistakes and doing the right thing. No, it's very typical endgame sort of thing, but it's a nice payoff.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like, it's a little expected, but at the same time, you know, you've got to have that sort of thing there. I think if they were trying to go too meta and do anything crazy at this point, maybe it would have been a bit far. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a appropriate ending. You know, you've got the Noah and Mio, or sorry, N and M sacrifice. They they're like, oh, we're actually still alive inside of you, but now we're gonna die together for you guys. And it's like, oh, thanks guys, appreciate it.
Yeah.
So they die, flash of light or whatever, and then it's kind of the post-final boss sequence, so to speak.
Yes, we're in a true Xenoblade 1 endgame moment. It's very reminiscent.
It
where,
is, yeah.
That sort of thing where, you know, you've beat the villain, but you sort of have this reflection of what is the right choice. And I like that Noah even, like, he hesitates for a moment. He's like, is it the right thing to reset this world when we don't know how it's going to turn out? But it's cool that, you know, he gets that reassurance from his friends, of course. I also think that this is part of the reason why we get the city people, Ghondor and Monica here. Because, as it's mentioned, that if the world resets, they're never going to have existed. You know, so there's that sort of moral dilemma there. But we have that line from Ghondor where she's like, I prefer to have the chance to be reborn in your better world, you know. So I think that's sort of basically alleviating that concern for Noah and the rest.
Yeah. I guess it does raise the question of, like, is that what actually happens when the worlds separate again at the end? Is that the city just, like, everyone from it ceases to exist? I have no idea.
Find out in Xenoblade 4.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. I guess it's intentionally open as it all is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I do like
also...
how, like, the queens are there in their cooler outfits. Well, I say cooler outfits, they're all pretty cool, actually. But, like, their hero outfits, I guess we'll call them.
Yeah.
And, you know, we get to see them, and they're like, you know, these are the worlds, Noah. They're going to separate soon. Okay.
Yeah. It's just nice seeing Melia.
Okay.
Yes. It's nice to see Melia and Nia actually together.
Yes.
You know, not just on Skype chat as we've seen them, but but yeah, it's that final moment where he makes his choice, and as you say, we cut back to the world sort of afterwards where things are getting ready to separate. Noah yeets Lucky Seven into the ocean, which is, I mean, he can call it back, right? But it's just sort of, it's the representation of, I'm done fighting. This whole world of living to fight, no more.
No more living to fight and fighting to live.
Exactly.
We broke the curse. Yeah, it's all pretty cool there. I like that they do that. And then it's just like the end, you know, the sad song plays, and you have all the sad times.
We get our parting words between all of the cast. Of course, I love Lanza's and Senna's one, where they just sort of do that little fist bump.
Yeah.
And they're just sort of, they promise to basically keep training. Their whole arc was about what they consider strength, and the fact that even the part they're going to keep at it. That was a nice one. Of course, Tyon on Uni.
Oh, it's so good.
Fourth best bud is like the best moment in the game. I will not hear otherwise.
Tyon's reaction gives me life.
Yeah.
It's like, Noah lands Yoran? It's like, Yoran?
Well, I'm only naming guys.
It's like, I ship it so hard.
It's such a perfect moment between them, and Uni's just teasing him all the way. It's perfect. They ended, again, best ship. Even though, of course, we're going to get a Noah and Mio last words and they actually have a kiss, which I think it's well earned. I wasn't expecting it, to be honest, but I think it's been built up enough that it's not like just a last minute throwing a kiss for the sake of it. It's actually a nice moment between them two that pays off their relationship. But still, Tyon and Uni best ship.
Yeah, I think it was, I need to remember, I think it's like Nimue's pendant. They say like it's like Kavesi made or something. So technically they get to keep it. I can't remember if they're talking about the pendant or if they're talking about Mio's book. One of
do
the
they
two.
do that to do with the there's something to do with like the recipe that Tyon gives Uni for like tea.
Oh,
where
that's
it only
what
uses
it
only uses Keves ingredients, which is again Tyon's level of detail as always.
Yeah, it's all pretty cute. So, you know, that happens, and then you get a pan to the heroes. I believe I don't know if it's only the heroes you got, or if it's just every hero, regardless if you saw them or not, when it, like, pans to all of them. I'm not 100%, but I didn't get every hero before I saw this, because I didn't know how to get Ethel, because it's you have to go to some obscure place with no question mark there. It's but I think it was just generic soldiers, I think. I'm not 100%, but I think they only show up if you
if you have all the heroes.
Interesting.
Because I remember when I saw it on your stream watching the end, I was like, hey, wait, I don't remember everyone being there.
Yeah,
But,
maybe that was it then. I mean, the important thing is Moamba is included there. So.
It's true, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Is
so
Hacked there? I don't think Hacked is there.
No, Hacked isn't there. We don't care about Hacked. But the fact that they brought Moamba back for that final scene, God, that made me so happy.
Yes, and
great.
Of course, we have to get to what I call fan service, but in a good way. First of all,
the picture.
well, before we get there, let's build up to it.
Mm-hmm.
We see Melia with she opens up the little portrait of RFC, and we've got Shulk's replica Monado from Future Connected there, which is nice to see. That's just a nice detail.
Yeah.
No Xenoblade 1 character thing, but it's nice to see that there.
Mm-hmm.
Over to Nia, and Poppy appears, and it's perfect.
Yeah,
like
she's there, and it's great. She was inside what I call the giant gem crafting machine the whole time.
Yes, it's just nice to see her again. She doesn't have any lines or anything, but it makes sense that she can exist there as well, because of course she's a machine, and I'm glad to see her again. And then it's the picture, which Giga Chad Rex, of course.
Oh, Lord.
In general, I like that we have a picture here. It's nice to see an adult Rex and see the cast together. I feel like Xenoblade 2, up to this point, maybe got a bit less fan service than 1 in terms of like area themes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact we get like a photo of the cast is really nice.
Rex is all grown up now. He's buff.
He's grown up in many ways, Kai. Because
Oh my God, 3 children. What
about the same time as well.
Yeah, it's. I don't know how I feel about that part of it. I don't really like it. I'll be honest.
He really did love all you guys. It's.
Yeah, I mean, I like the photo, and like, did they really have to have like all of them holding a child? That's a bit. I think it's a bit far. I think if they didn't have the children there, the picture would have been perfect.
Like, I'm, on the one hand, like, I think you're right, and I'm certainly not campaigning to hear that Rex got with all of them in the end. But also, it's so funny that I'm also glad it's there, just...
It's iconic, I cannot deny that in any sense.
It's so funny. It raises so many questions, I guess, like, we did wonder, part of it in my mind was like, okay, what's Rex going to do now that Pyro and Mithra are both there? Is he going to choose one? No. He chooses both and Nia, because why not? I'm surprised we didn't just have, like, Pandora there with a kid as well or something. Just
yeah, honestly, they just show, like, random characters from the game.
All the NPCs lined up with, like, 100 kids.
Mewy shows up and he's just like, oh no!
Oh God!
It's. I wish they signified it in a different way. Maybe with maybe if they zoomed in on them all having rings or something. You know what I mean? I would have personally preferred that, but anyway.
It does, of course, though. I find it funny that it does sort of answer. I've used that picture to try and work out some questions of how long after Xenoblade 2 does the world restore and that.
Mm-hmm.
I try to base it off of okay, we know that Mio's meant to be one of those kids, which is you could sort of guess it here, but it's more of a post-game thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the maths now. So it has its uses, the picture, but it's something.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the world of Xenoblade 3, shall we?
Yes.
Until Xenoblade 4, when there's a picture of Rex and Uni and Mio and Senna and 3 babies. But
no.
but for now, at least, the worlds do part, and there's that really nice scene where they're running after each other on both sides as the worlds are tearing apart. It's just Smoge. They've got to hit you emotionally at the end of a Xenoblade game. They can't not do it. They can't resist those madmen at Monolith Soft. And yeah, it is a brutal scene.
It's mad that they literally hated each other at the beginning in the game, and now they're all super chill. Yeah,
literally just trying to fight the worlds colliding just to have one last goodbye with each other, and it hits hard, but it's a nice. I mean, that's where it wraps up. It's sort of this bittersweet ending where we don't know exactly where things are going to go. We'll get to like the post-credit scene in a bit, but it sort of ends on the worlds are separate, and maybe one day they'll find each other. It goes for that bittersweet ending, which kind of a bit like Xenoblade 2, but even Xenoblade 2, you know, Pyra and Mithra show up again at the end of the post-credits, and that sort of resolves that sad bit. So they just had to hit us where it hurts for the final game of the trilogy, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, all of the games have this, I believe, very deliberate thing of having quite an open ending where, you know, things are kind of resolved. The main conflict of the game itself is resolved, but then it's very much the idea of what they do from there is quite vague, and it's like, it's positive, but it's up to interpretation and up to what whoever's playing wants to believe happens. You know, it's like at the end of Xenoblade 1, you want to believe like they just carry on lives as normal. Xenoblade 2, it's like what happens when they make it to the New Elysium. This game, it's like, you know, do they meet each other? It's just kind of one of those questions that, like, you know, it's just up to interpretation. It's up to leaving it open so that you can kind of decide that for yourself. And well, until they add DLC or something. Some people say that. I don't think it will happen, but
Well, we do get a last bit of wrap up after the post-credit scene, when we see back to the world. It's back to the way it was at the beginning. The world has resumed as normal. It was a success, and for our final bit, also we see Yoren there, which is nice. Yoren's back.
It's cool to see him back.
It is, yeah. But we hear the off-scene melody, and we sort of get like a smile from Noah, which you can interpret that how you like, but it definitely is meant to represent that elements of the other world are there. Either Noah's going to regain his memories, he still has his memories. You can interpret it many different ways, but I think it's basically saying they will find a way to meet somehow. So it's not just a totally depressing ending. And that's it.
It's the end of the game, and it's, you know, you get the big monolith scream where it's like kind of purpley and it's cool like background, and wow, it's such a interesting ending. Like, I think when I first played it felt extremely bittersweet, but when you stop to reflect on it, you realise that, you know, a lot more of it it's better than it first seems, we'll say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because essentially nothing happened. Like,
over the course of the game, it was all about 1 second in real time.
Yeah, and like I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, oh, that means it was all meaningless. No, it doesn't. And even we see, like, again, the worlds are going to connect somehow. I'm guessing that Melia and Nia still are in contact with each other, and all that's still there. Who knows how that'll end up? Who knows if we'll see how that ends up? Again, that'll be for our future of Xenoblade discussion when we do that. But it's interesting that they sort of did it in a way that's very open to interpretation, and we don't know, like, when about exactly is this world of Xenoblade 1 that we end on. Like, I sort of worked out based on the photo that I'm assuming it's probably 20 years or so, 20, 30 years after the end of Xenoblade 1 and 2.
Yeah, that would be fair to say.
Which does give room for, you know, the rest of the cast being there if they ever do something. Again, that's a future thing. But it's sort of weird because it's not a perfect resolution, but there's nothing wrong with doing something that leaves it up to interpretation. Even if, who knows if this is the end of the trilogy. Because if it is, I guess that is a bit of a like, okay, well, that doesn't it would have wrapped things up nicer had the worlds merged, you know, if it was a true end of the trilogy. But also, I think I like that they did it this way, and it leaves us open to have discussions like this. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It gives us an extra video's worth to talk about, you know?
Now we're talking, making content for us. Thank you, Monolith Soft.
Yeah, it's a cool ending, with just how it does that, and like life continues as normal. It's like we say, where it's just open, and it's super interesting, and it does make me hope that there is more going on, but at the same time, if it were to end like this, I'd completely understand. When I first played Xenoblade 1 and beat it and everything, and this was before, like, I think at the time I beat it, only Xenoblade X had been announced or something. Like, you know, it was way before Xenoblade 2 and everything.
Yeah.
And
you first played it on 3DS, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Same here. So
oh, yeah,
about
so
the same
Xenoblade
time.
X must have been out. And you know, at the time, I genuinely was like, I'm okay with like this game not getting a sequel, especially a direct one, because I saw that Xenoblade 1 ending and I was like, I don't think we need to continue Shulk's story anymore. Like, I think this was good.
Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of has continued through all the games where I've looked at it and gone like, you know, these characters' stories don't need to continue. We've had them. Let's not draw it out with another game that could potentially ruin the characters, like many TV series and movies and games have all sometimes stumbled upon. So I guess we'll see. Future content to talk about.
Yeah, I, you know, they could have gone all in with 3 for like here's like Noah, you play as Noah and Shulk, and they're both wielding the Monado and Aegis sword, and I mean, I would have loved that. It would have been cool, but
it would have been so cool. But
yeah, but I have massive respect for them for keeping that restraint, for keeping 3 its own story that survives on its own great characters and introduces us to completely new stuff. And the way it manages to balance out that old stuff and the new stuff, I think it's quite masterfully done. You know, they're geniuses at Monolith Soft, and whatever they do next, whether it's a Xenoblade continuation or not, I mean, they've earned my full trust at this point. That at the very least, it's going to be great. So
yeah, they very clearly know what they're doing. They've built up with just the Xenoblade series alone such like a strong rapport in terms of the game industry, where like I think a lot of people would consider them one of the best development teams just overall, like because of how good the games are, the high quality, the fact that they're coming out fairly frequently if you include things like DLC and remakes and stuff.
Yeah,
you know, because we know the workplace conditions are good. Overall, Monolith's just knocked it out of the park the last decade.
Yeah, it's just cool to look back on the fact that Xenoblade 1, you know, people had a campaign to get it released in America, and then now we're at Xenoblade 3, which has been nominated for Game of the Year, which is, you know, is big recognition, and it's really cool to see the series continuing to strive and thrive on the Switch, and I'm sure it will into the future in some capacity. So yeah, very, very happy about all of this. But that does bring us to the end of the discussion. That's pretty much all our thoughts on Chapter 7 and the chapter breakdowns. But like we said, there will be more, so do stay tuned to BunchaJokahs here on YouTube, or podcasting sites like Google Podcasts, Spotify, for audio-only versions of these discussions. Because next up, we're going to have a little break over the Christmas time. We've got our regular podcasts and stuff. But we'll be coming back soon in January with our Future of Xenoblade discussion, where we talk about the potential of where could these characters go next? Will there be a Xenoblade Warriors? What's going to happen? All of that will be discussed in there. We'll also have some more breakdowns on 3 specifically, like looking at the heroes and the gameplay in more detail that we didn't have time for in the craziness of these discussions. And plenty of our rest of our content as well, like regular monthly news podcasts, reactions to directs, and hopefully we'll see the upcoming Xenoblade DLC at some point over that as well. So plenty for us to react to and look forward to in the future here. But Kai, where else can people find you at?
They can find me at my Twitch. Fascurreyn, links will be in the description. I'm still just playing a bunch of random games and stuff, having a bit of fun with it. So, you know, feel free to join in. I'm just doing a bit of everything, you know, trying whatever I've got. On YouTube, my Xenoblade 3 playthrough is still releasing. One of the most recent episodes we were just talking about before recording was the moment in Cadentia where my soul broke. And I feel like if you really want to like see me at my lowest, then episode, I think it's 40, is definitely the one to watch.
There's definitely some highlights in those reactions, so definitely go check those out. And of course, a big thank you to our friend Samm, who makes the thumbnail for all these videos, despite the fact he still hasn't finished the game yet. Come on, Samm.
It's been so long.
Also made our logo. Yes. He'll get there maybe by our next year discussion. This time next year, he might be there. We can have like a year in review, like a year's look back on Xenoblade 3, our thoughts a year later with Samm, maybe. You know.
There you go.
Not impossible. But thank you, Samm. A link to his Twitter in the description below. And we will just see you guys in the next video. So have a good Christmas if you're watching this when it comes out, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.